Welcome to Parsons Communication Design Lecture Series for the Spring 2023. My name is Yirun Kang, Associate Director of the program. And as you know, CD Lectures is a place for communication design students to meet design thinkers and practitioners sort of within the discipline and in the adjacent fields. And we have been mostly inviting people from the outside of the school until now, but in this semester, we are planning to spend the time with designers within our community, because even though you see your faculty on campus every day, there's not much chance to learn about their practices besides teaching. So we're kicking off this semester with hearing from Elaine Lopez today, and next week will be Lin Kyung, then Pascal Glissman, then 908A, which is myself and Andrew Leclerc, and Synoptic Office, which is Casper Lam and Eugene Park, and lastly, Kelly Walters. The lecture takes place in every 2 weeks on Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time throughout the semester on Zoom. And you can find out more details about this lecture and upcoming lectures from the CD app, of course, and watch the past lectures from our YouTube channel. Please subscribe. And yeah, today's speaker is Elaine Lopez. She is a Cuban-American designer, researcher, artist, and educator whose work explores the intersection of culture, identity, equity, and risograph printing within the design field. She had her BFA from the University of Florida and her MFA from the Rhode Island School of Design, both in graphic design. She was awarded the AICAD Post-Graduate Teaching Fellowship at the Maryland Institute College of Art, where she taught in the undergraduate and graduate graphic design programs. She is currently an assistant professor of communication design at Parsons and has served on the board of AIGA Chicago and the Type Directors Club. Her work has been featured in exhibitions and publications and conferences such as the STA 100, Extra Bold, a feminist, inclusive, anti-racist, non-binary field guide for graphic designers, Where Are the Black Designers, and the Invisible Conference. Elaine is passionate about creating inclusive and equitable design spaces, and her practice challenges existing design paradigms. So with all that, welcome, Elaine. And
I'm tired just
pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Arun. Yeah, that was a lot. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Thank you all for being here. Just a few things. I have a little cold, so if you hear disturbing coughing, I'm okay. It's not COVID. Second thing, I'm looking at my notes on my phone, so if I look down, that's what's happening. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and hope that this works out as it should. So let me know if you can see that okay. Does that look good?
Looks good.
Perfect. Okay. So thank you for being here and for taking the time out of your day. Even though I know many of you are forced to be here because this is required for classes, I still appreciate it. I promise to make it worth your while. Thank you, Yirun, for organizing this series. The title of this is Decolonization is Not a Good Metaphor for the Change Needed in the Design Industry. It's quite long, but it best encompasses how I feel about the term that has grown in popularity in recent years. Before I dive in, I'd like to share a little bit about myself and my background. Here we go. Irun kind of shared a lot already, but essentially my work explores the intersection of culture, identity, equity, and risograph printing. This book here that is scrolling through, that is a little stuck, is my thesis from 2019 titled Making Common. This book and my work in general sets the conditions for communication around cultural diversity and inequality. Through my practice, I create new ways to share, honor, and celebrate the stories that have been neglected for too long due to white supremacy, patriarchy, and other forms of structural oppression. I like to create immersive graphic design experiences that challenge people to question and expand their worldview. If you're interested in diving into this book further, I'll put a link in the chat at the end of this talk. Also, it's available on my website, elainelopez.design. I currently teach at Parsons And like you mentioned, before this, I taught at Pratt and before that at MICA. But before entering academia, I spent about 10 years in Chicago working as a designer at various types of companies, starting with pharmaceutical marketing, then later point of purchase advertising, followed by human-centered design for innovation, and later human-centered design for social impact. I've always felt restless within design, even now. And for me, part of that restlessness has stemmed from the lack of diversity within the industry that often made me feel isolated. So in 2017, I served as the diversity and inclusion co-lead for AIGA Chicago. During my tenure, I had the opportunity to host many events that centered people who also felt excluded from Chicago's design community at the time. At these events, people would come up to me and say, you know, we have a hard time hiring people of color. And I wanted to figure out why people were saying this. You know, was it because people of color were not applying for jobs, or because their portfolios didn't meet the requirements? Each of these issues to me has different solutions. So like a true human-centered designer, I conducted some research. With the help of my friend and researcher, Maris Garcia, we carefully crafted questions to send to the owners of independent design studios in Chicago. I then turned their responses into a presentation and a PDF shared openly. And in 2020, I had the opportunity to present this report during the inaugural Where Are the Black Designers conference. One of them, this is a long whole thing, which actually, you know, from the perspective of 2022 feels quaint, right? Like I think we've covered a lot of this, but one of the main insights from this report was that many design positions are filled through word of mouth. So this signaled need for more diverse networks, right? People need to be friends with different kinds of people. And one of the first and perhaps most important networks that we build begins right here at school. So I decided to go back to school myself and to give myself the time and space to think more deeply about the issue. So after applying to several schools, I was accepted to the Rhode Island School of Design, where I encountered the lack of diversity among students and faculty like right away. You know, I thought it was bad in industry, but turns out it was maybe almost a little bit worse in academia. And this is also the first place I encountered the term decolonization, and where I realized the urgency of expanding design to include more voices. Students today are more culturally diverse than ever before, and design education has struggled a bit to keep up with you all, as I'm sure you've noticed. The industry also needs a lot of work to do to prepare for you. So back to why I think the term decolonization is not a good metaphor. Before I dive in, I also want to mention that this is just my opinion. There's a lot of great scholarship being produced that uses this terminology, and I don't mean to discount that work. I know Jory Tunstall is releasing a book as we speak with Decolonized Design as a title, and I'm sure it's amazing. And so I'm not trying to discount that scholarship. I just want to share my perspective. One of my first, so there's a lot of scholarship that supports this term, but there is a lot of scholarship also that warns us against using it in different contexts. This famous piece by E. Tuck and K. Wayne Yang examines the origins of decolonization, which refer to the repatriation of indigenous lands and life. I highly recommend you read this whole thing. It's a little bit dense, but it certainly gives a good perspective. But I'll just read this one excerpt from it. And it says, one trend we've noticed with growing apprehension is the ease with which the language of decolonization has been superficially adopted into education and other social sciences, supplanting prior ways of talking about social justice, critical methodologies, or approaches which decenter settler perspectives. So applying the term decolonizations to things besides the returning of land diffuses the meaning and makes things more difficult for the people who have been displaced and who are fighting for their sovereignty. Also, it's not just the term itself is not very actionable within the context of design. So I don't think graphic design was ever colonized. In fact, I believe it's a tool of colonization. It's a profession that has existed for a really long time and was named in 1922 by William Addison Dwiggins and has been practiced in the ways that we study it predominantly by white men. I think that's like a fact. We really can't discount that. Does it lack diversity? Absolutely. Is it inaccessible to most people? Yes. Can it solve the world's problems? Probably not. But we certainly won't get anywhere by trying to simplify these issues just under one term, decolonization. So for starters, yeah, so like I mentioned, it's not very actionable, right? To me, the term implies the removal or withdrawal, which then begs the question, which parts of design do we remove without alienating other people in the process? I'm keenly aware that the work of decolonization is often left to people of color, and that it turns off the very people who need to hear the conversation the most and be most engaged. It's also important to recognize the global nature of design. Many of you come from many different countries around the world. And is it a term that applies to all cultures, right? Like, does decolonization apply to every country? Maybe, maybe not. And furthermore, how does that then translate within design, within these cultures, right? So this was a last minute ad. I added this morning, and this actually comes from my student, Danielle Berger, who is making work about her Filipino identity. And she actually wrote this today. And I was like, gosh, I'm giving a talk about this later, but I'll go ahead and read what she said. And she says, ultimately, my biggest obstacle in my thesis has been making work that challenges Eurocentric design standards, when the only ways I know how to design are by following Eurocentric design standards. How do I design for the thing I'm designing against? This has been a really hard question to answer, but I feel as if I'm overcoming that obstacle and learning how to answer that question through design, which her project that she just shared like 30 minutes ago addresses. It's challenging to make work about culture and identity. I've done this for a while, and it's difficult, especially for folks who have not been able to study their histories in school, who have to do that work. There's also a lot of heavy content when you start digging into the past. I think it's okay to use Western design standards that we know to communicate this new context. Decolonize the content and use the Western design standards as a Trojan horse to communicate that information to the people that need to hear it the most. Sometimes it's appropriate to challenge the form, designing typefaces for languages that don't often have, that don't have as many typefaces designed. I think that's wonderful. Considering new organizational design structures, ornamentation that has been frowned upon perhaps within Western design, like bringing that back. That goes against the grain. Those are great examples of decolonizing form making, but I think sometimes it's okay to use what you know to get the message out, which I believe is the most important thing. The slide is controversial. I want us to view, so like, let's colonize design, right? Like, instead of removing things from design, let's add our cultures, let's add all this stuff to it. Let's keep what exists that works and build upon it. So like colonizing, but like in a good way, not like in the violent, scary, horrible way. I want us to view the inclusivity of marginalized people and perspectives as a positive thing and the natural evolution of this profession. The merging of cultures and ideas has led to many wonderful innovations in our society. Let's approach this exciting evolution of the field with a curiosity and an open mind. And let's all participate and make room for one another. And again, I feel like the term decolonization doesn't do that. It's kind of a negative, right? So let's look at this in a positive way. Besides, the true issues with design are capitalism and white supremacy, right? These are lectures for another day. If you're interested in learning more about the relationship between capitalism and design, I recommend this book, the book Caps Lock by Ruben Patter, that was just released last year. In it, Patter methodologically, that's a hard word, analyzes the relationship between capitalism and design, starting with the role that design played in the creation of the first systems of currency in ancient Mesopotamia through today. You might even have some of the chapters assigned as readings in your classes this semester or this year. It's a huge book, but it has a lot of pictures, so I really encourage you to read the whole thing to better understand the intersection of capitalism and design. Additionally, the characteristics of white supremacy culture are really pervasive in not just design, but pretty much every space we inhabit. This list by Kenneth Jones and Tema Okun left me dumbfounded the first time I saw it. This is the list of all of the terms of characteristics of white supremacy culture that exist within our organizations. I'm going to read an excerpt from from their website or from the article they wrote, but culture is powerful precisely because it's so present at this, and at the same time, very difficult to name and identify. The characteristics listed here are damaging because they're used as norms and standards without being proactively named or chosen by the group. They're damaging because they promote white supremacy thinking. They're damaging to both people of color and to white people. And organizations that are led by people of color or a majority of people of color can also demonstrate many damaging characteristics of white supremacy culture. If you've experienced any of these, feel free to add them in the chat. Every time I look at this list, I feel like I can pinpoint to an experience or example of something that caused me personal harm that comes from this list. So, okay, what do? Everything is terrible. How can we help, right? Like, so overwhelming. The world is literally on fire every day. It's like chaos. So what I'm going to do now is share a few projects that might provide some inspiration, some hope, or possibilities for the ways that things can possibly be. Ultimately, I think these projects help to broaden perspectives, interrogate our values, challenge norms, tell new stories, and share those with the world. So this first project I'm going to share was created by Paolo Cardini. He's a professor of industrial design at the Rhode Island School of Design. In 2017, he traveled to Cuba, India, Iran, Ethiopia, Peru, and, next slide. And asked students of industrial design to write stories about the futures from their perspectives, right? So he's just like, imagine the future from where you're sitting right now. He also took students to local artisans and learned traditional ways of making. He then asked them to design objects based on these stories of the future that they imagined. Students came up with the most amazing objects, including this yoga headset, a virtual reality device that enhances spiritual enrichment amid a hectic Indian work culture. Or these devices called Together and Different, a series of digital wearables that help manage interactions between different communities in Ethiopia. These auricular real-time translators provide smooth communication and equal access to any resource. The design of the objects also proudly celebrate the cultural identity of the wearer. And this last project, or there was a lot of projects, but this last one that I'll share is titled Gallinazo, and it's a post-animal species that flies around the city patrolling environmental misconduct. This bird is augmented with cameras, facial recognition capabilities, and a geo-mapping system. When it detects a violation, it swoops down and confronts the transgression to reprimand their behavior. I would be terrified if this thing came at me and told me to throw away my litter in the proper place. As the designer on this project, I was tasked with designing the graphics for the exhibition and the catalog that told the story of the project while highlighting the students' work from a non-Western perspective. So this is a shot of the catalog that was actually designed as a newspaper. So it was printed on newsprint and designed. The form of the newspaper was also intentional in that the futures are constantly changing every day, but also it was very light and easy to be transported to all of these different places. In addition, it was able to be taken apart and put up on walls to recreate the exhibitions in several different countries. We highlighted the student narratives in their native languages while de-emphasizing the English copy. This publication included over 6 languages and was really challenging to typeset, but worth it. I feel like I learned a lot through this. When folded in a certain way, it also served as a label for each of the artworks. And then when displayed on the wall, it showed a hero image for each of the projects and provided context for each piece. The exhibition took place in Rome and brought together professors from each country to discuss the impact of the project and the implications for the future of design. The most revealing part of this project was that by telling stories about the future, students exposed the reality of their current situations. We made room for other perspectives and were careful as designers to be respectful to each culture. So the next project I'll share is inspired by my grandmother. So I think another thing we can do with design is use it to learn about cultures and share the stories of our own cultures. So in For as long as I knew her, my grandmother watched the evening news to record the lottery numbers. This is one of the many notebooks she kept, and you can see here the dates, sets, numbers. So I decided to research this behavior a little bit further and discovered that it wasn't just her. In Cuba, the lottery has had a long history tracing back to the migration of workers from China in the 1800s. What we're looking at here is a lottery ticket from 1879. This one is from 1919. This one's from 1952. Beautiful design. So obviously these caught my eye. And in addition to the lottery, Cubans developed a system similar to Chinese numerology, where a meaning is assigned to each number to help translate dreams and daily situations into numbers to play in the local lottery. The system is called La Charada, and it is really common among Cubans. If you happen to know any older Cuban people, ask them like what a number between 1 and 100 means, and they might say like cat or butterfly. I'll break it down a little bit. So for example, number 1 means horse. So if you see a horse today, you should play the number 1 in the lottery and then you'll be rich. That's how the system works. So I was really fascinated by this history, and I decided that I wanted to conduct more research using the system and the numbers of the words of La Charada as a guide. So since number 1 means horse, I Googled Cuban horse and found this Wikipedia page. I then turned that information into the signatures of a book. This one is for the number 16, and it talks about how the Spanish brought bullfighting to Cuba in 1538. I then designed an interactive publishing game where the numbers you pick determine which page you get. Pick a number, and then you grab the corresponding signature. So you don't really get to pick which signature you want. It's based on chance. Number 4 is cats. And so when you research Cuban cats, you learn about Ernest Hemingway's cats with 6 toes. Number 7 is seashell, and this explains how the CIA tried to assassinate Fidel Castro with an exploding seashell, among many other ways. Each page tells a fragment of Cuban history, and to represent how we learn about culture through random bits and pieces of information. Admittedly, this is a complicated system to explain, and it was hard to make this project without the feedback of a Cuban person, but it was also important for me to stay true to the custom. If we want to create from an authentic place, we have to feel comfortable sharing our cultures and learning from things that aren't simple, straightforward, or familiar. Okay. Another project inspired by my heritage is based on the game of dominoes. Normally I would ask people to raise their hands if they know how to play dominoes, but I can't see your hands right now, so we'll forego that. I was working on a project in grad school, and someone was talking about dominoes, and they assumed that this is how you played dominoes, right? Like that you just stack them up and knock them over. But to me, dominoes has always looked like this. This is a place called Domino Park in the Little Havana neighborhood of Miami. Here's a picture I showed previously from Cuba where you see folks playing dominoes. I was inspired by Studio Moniker's Dazzle Fungus series. These are crowdsourced installations that provide participants with stickers and a set of instructions. And then participants are given the opportunity to collectively create the installation. This allows people to feel connected and engaged to the piece, and to have a more active experience beyond being spectators. So with that logic, I created 55 9x17-inch sticker tiles made out of vinyl for a giant game of dominoes. Those who knew how to play taught others who didn't, and people worked together to install each piece. The point was for it not to look perfect, but mostly to just learn how to play this game in a memorable way. And the dots also kind of became part of the exhibition. The meandering installation stayed up for a few days and added some whimsy to the space. If anything, it's interesting. Oh yeah, we should do this here. If we're allowed to sort of have group exhibitions again, I'd be happy to recreate it. Just before COVID shut down the world, I had the opportunity to share this piece with my students at the Maryland Institute College of Art. For many, installing this project was one of the more positive memories of the semester, especially considering how how much social distancing happened after. Participants got to chat, collaborate, and play while learning the rules of dominoes in a memorable way. The piece started invading other pieces in the exhibition, and students who may not have gotten to interact really had the opportunity to work together. So there was grad students working with undergrads, or folks that were just walking by, jumped in on the fun. This piece gives me great joy for many reasons, but most of all because it allows me to bring a part of my culture into a space that's predominantly white, and it sort of invade that, colonize it, if you will, even if only for a brief period of time. All right. So now I want to share some projects that I've worked on more recently that focus on culture and identity. The difference here, these projects have been made for clients. So the first project I'll share is for an exhibition by artist and educator Mark Stockton. This was installed at the University of Pennsylvania. This should animate. Okay, great. This exhibition is titled Mark Stockton 100 People, and it's a group of 100 hand-drawn portraits that were made with graphite on paper and intended to be perceived as a single work in form and experience. Each subject connects via eye contact to the viewer, addressing the objectifying nature of portraiture head-on. Portraits have a complex history. They have the potential to venerate, to emotionally connect, and to resonate into lived experience. They also are tools of commodification, objectification, and colonization. All right. The exhibition examines who and how we venerate and connect. What is representation in a larger sense? Using demographics to structure an equitable range of representation and selecting subjects from a wide range of time periods, from the beginning of portrait photography to the present, the ongoing series seeks to create an evolving canon of portraits reflecting an expanded narrative of history and identity while centering ideas of inclusivity. So all of that was to say, it's really interesting to pair people next to each other that may not have existed during the same time period. But by having these portraits, you're able to sort of reflect on how their conversations might have gone. We created the physical catalog, but we also created the publication in a card form and scaled down the portraits into intimate handheld depictions. During the run of the exhibition, the order of the work was rearranged on a weekly basis, again, to create that dialogue amongst the positioning of the images. This publication, this untraditional publication in card form, is designed to reinforce the non-hierarchical structure of the project, inviting viewers to reorder and reflect. So this is the whole card set, how it came together. And then here are some more images. Again, here you see the wide range of portraits. I also created, yes, it's playing, good. I also created a website that serves as a digital catalog to make the experience accessible for those who were not there. This digital catalog features all of the portraits from the exhibition and remains live to this day. The exhibition is now down, but people can still recreate the experience through the carousels that are randomized and also through scrolling down on the website. I'll play a little bit. And the final project I'm going to share is, I'm currently working on it. So it's actually, this is the second to last project I'll share, but this project is titled Excluded Inclusion, the work of Chen Lock Lee. This was also at the University of Pennsylvania, and it's an exhibition for the late artist Chen Lock Lee. He was a printmaker, painter, and educator based in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, Mr. Lee passed away from COVID-19 early in 2020, and his daughter Romana has taken it upon herself to preserve her father's legacy. She's doing the hard work of archiving his work and sharing it with the world. She recognizes that there's not enough representation of Asian artists in the US, so she's working hard to make sure he's honored and remembered. This is an image from the exhibition. This exhibition is actually still currently up, so if you happen to find yourself at Penn for whatever reason, make sure to check it out at the Sachs at the Annenberg Center. For the design of this exhibition, here's the website. Yes, okay, that's going to play in a minute. For the design of this exhibition, it was important for me to show both languages with an equal hierarchy. All of the materials are bilingual. Like Mr. Lee's identity, he was both Chinese and American, and it was important for him. It was important for me to represent those languages equally. So all of the materials exist, not intertwined, but side by side. So the website is split equally. You can kind of see that. And although his work was mostly based in watercolor and printmaking, the visual direction we chose for the exhibition was from a self-portrait he took when he was very young, enforcing that the exhibition is about who he was as a person and celebrating his Asian identity. Yeah, and so here are some social media graphics. Again, everything was doubled to make sure that those identities coexisted. Yeah. So that project is still ongoing, and I can't believe I did this whole presentation without mentioning Riso. So here's the thing I literally just printed last week just because I have to. This is for an event that's going to happen in March at Swarthmore College, and it's an event that features Philadelphia, Pennsylvania-based activists, and this series of this workshop is going to highlight the work of these activists and help students on this campus receive guidance and support from these prominent organizers. This was printed on this chocolate iridescent paper with metallic gold and aqua, and it was a real treat to print. And here you can kind of see the texture. I literally just scanned these yesterday. This event hasn't even happened yet, so this is fresh, but I have to show some Riso work. So here it is. Yeah. And so back to, in conclusion, while things may seem dire at the moment, we should hang on to hope for the future. Let's think of ways to broaden our perspectives, to interrogate our values, and to challenge norms, to tell new stories, and to share those with the world. You can call this decolonization if you'd like, but I just ask that you ultimately strive to use design to reconnect to our cultures and to celebrate our identities. Also use specific language, right? Like, are you decolonizing, or are you talking about your culture, or are you being inclusive? So specificity in language is very important. And finally, keep in touch. My website, like I mentioned earlier, is ElaineLopez.design. And my Instagram is elopez12. Thank you. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing your insights and amazing projects. I personally always feel honored and sort of privileged to be able to listen to the designers about the projects that they have done, and especially for some of the projects like yours that has sort of this deep kind of cultural roots that I'm not always familiar with. So I guess we're gonna open. We're gonna have questions and answers. And I have first question for you while everyone else is kind of thinking about it. Students, you can feel free to type in your questions in the chat. I can relay that. And also Elaine can just respond directly from the chat if that's convenient for you. But in the meantime, I guess one question that I have is that, like, at Parsons, we have a very diverse student body, as you know, and many of them are graduating very soon. And I was just wondering if you have any sort of advice for them as they kind of embark on their journey to start building their career and practice, and how do are there kind of specific ways that they can sort of celebrate their identities in this process?
Yeah. I really like, and I guess I'll share a personal experience. So I made work about my culture and identity in undergrad, and I found that during the interview process that those projects were actually really, they served two purposes, right? During an interview, they helped, the interviewer see my design skills, which I think is ultimately what an interview is for, but also it helped me to share a little bit about who I was, right? And my culture and identity. And that made for a really rich conversation. And so I always like to encourage students to make work about culture and identity, and to know that they can speak to that work confidently in an interview, because it's about what they know and who they are. And so it sort of serves a dual purpose when you make that work. I think, like I said, I think industry has a long way to go to catch up with the brilliance of our students. But I think if you know who you are and where you're from, and you can make work about that and speak about those things articulately, then that's going to help you when you enter this field that is maybe not prepared to handle people from so many different cultures. But as long as you feel comfortable and confident in that and can sort of stand up for yourself and call out microaggressions in a respectful way, right? Just having that strength and that pride in your heritage and your identity is going to make you a little bit stronger, right? And help you sort of battle and confront some of the situations you may run into. I think your culture and your strength and your identity is a gift, and it's a strength, actually. Not, you shouldn't see that as a weakness. Being bilingual or trilingual, that's amazing, right? And I feel like the industry has ways to catch up. They may not know what to do with a bilingual person, but you know that you can typeset in 2 languages. And if a project were to arise, you're going to be chosen first for that, which was certainly my experience. I worked at a company where I was the only Spanish speaker. And so they put me on all the projects to travel. So it was awesome, even to countries that didn't speak Spanish. I just became known as like the global person. And that was really a wonderful experience for me, and something that may happen. So I guess my advice is really just like, know who you are, celebrate that, and use that as a positive thing.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions from the audience?
This is a controversial topic, so I'm fully expecting like, people love the word decolonization sometimes, so I'm happy to battle it out. Not really. Again, I'm just saying, I think there are better words. Danielle. Hi.
Yeah, so this is a question from Danielle. I love this lecture. I wish I had heard it when I first started graphic design at Parsons. I'm a senior now. What if CD students were required to make a project that connects to their cultural background and identity? Is this something that would be considered for Core 1 type classes?
Actually, we're doing a project right now in core type 2 about this, right? About home and where you are, and using typography to learn about that. So I think this stuff is definitely sinking in. So we haven't started the project yet, but I know it ran last year and it was successful. Students had a lot of fun with that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if I can just add one more thing, like this is just the topic that's kind of the conversation's ongoing about like what it means to decolonize graphic design education. I mean, so like this is a rapidly evolving conversation too. So the curriculum at Parsons is also shifting. So yeah, thanks for asking the question. Thanks for answering. This is a question from James. How would you recommend balancing personal priorities such as culture, identity, activism, while still trying to make a living in a more constrained corporate landscape? That's a great question.
Yeah, James, I don't know yet. Great question. That's why I'm in academia. This is a wonderful question. It's what brought me back to academia. I felt really frustrated in the corporate landscape where like I was not really being given projects about cultural identity. Everything was, again, in service of capitalism, right? Like, how do we sell this? How do we do that? And so personally, I made the decision to go to graduate school to give myself the luxury, which it really was. It shouldn't be a luxury, but unfortunately it was, to go back and learn about my culture. And it was hard, actually, to be a 30-something-year-old back in school learning about my family's history, right? I didn't get that in the American public school system, unfortunately. And then I graduated grad school, and you go right back to client work. And I felt very lucky to have been able to work on these 2 projects that I shared that do deal with culture and identity to some capacity. But they're rare, few and far between. and it's difficult to do this work and make a living, right? I think that's perhaps a place, again, where the industry has space to grow. How do we make money and also teach others about cultures and make that work? I think it happens within the arts. It can happen within education. I think there's a lot of room to grow. And I think as designers, that's, at least personally, that's the work I want to make. It's the work that excites me. I think design can really shine in that space. And so I also think the art book fair scene is a good place for that, self-publishing. You see a lot of people making that work and sort of selling it. So that's a way to kind of make a living. Not that I don't think many people making art books are making a huge living off of that. It's more of a passion thing, but it's a really great space to connect. But yeah, James, that's a great question, and we still have to pay the bills. So it may be that you're working at a regular job 9 to 5, and then you make zines on the side that you sell at a book fair, and that's how you scratch that itch, if you will. But we have a long way to go for sure. And like, be gentle with yourselves too, right? Like, I think we're living in a really exhausting world, and so there's pressure to do all these things. It goes back to white supremacy culture, right? Like, everything doesn't have to be go all the time.
That's okay.
Trying to make from a place of joy and peace and relaxation, or making things that are that don't have to be laborious, that can satisfy your need for making without making you tired too.
Cool. I think we have time for, I was going to say one last question, and that's Joe. Hi, Joe. 2 questions. I would love to hear more about how you think the process of using Riso, which is inherently more labor intensive than other modes of printing, informs and enhances the impact of your work.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the first time I Riso printed something, I cried a little bit because I couldn't believe how easy, because Riso can be easy, it could also be very hard, how easy it was to produce something so physical and bright and colorful, just, spits it out. And that to me was a big revelation, and why I've been so drawn to the Riso. I think design is missing a lot of physicality and labor intensiveness, if you will, right? Like, why everything shouldn't just be able to be printed out or uploaded, right? I think the labor intensiveness, the physicality, even the challenges and mistakes of Riso are what make it special. The experimentation, you don't really know how an ink is going to interact with another ink, or how it's going to look on a certain paper. And so all of that requires a little bit more time and patience and letting go, which are all, again, qualities that I feel like are missing in design sometimes. It's all perfection and efficiency. So that contrast just makes it a delight. And that's why I love Riso printing. I love teaching Riso printing. Hopefully we'll be able to do that here soon. But we need more physicality in design. I think screen printing provides that, but then screen printing requires all this space and materials, where the Riso is just like, if you're lucky enough to be near this machine, you can just like pull something out of your pocket and spit it out, and it's probably going to look pretty cool. And that's really, really great. I think it's a magical, wonderful, generous machine. That's another lecture I have as well. Happy to share that someday.
Cool.
Thank you.
I think we should wrap up, but thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for great questions from the audience. And as I said, this lecture will be archived in our YouTube channel. I'm posting the link in the chat right now. Please subscribe. And thank you so much. And I'll see everyone in 2 weeks in another lecture series.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.